When her son's fever spiked to 104 degrees, Nurse Chloe Hughes faced an impossible choice. Let her baby die, or call the one man she swore she'd never contact again, the Greek crime lord who didn't know he had a son. One desperate phone call in a freezing Chicago apartment would shatter 18 months of hiding, unleash a world of armed convoys and brutal power plays, and force her to choose between the safety she built in the shadows and the dangerous truth she could no longer outrun. Like this story, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far my stories travel. Now, let's begin. The apartment was cold enough that Chloe Hughes could see her breath. She pulled the threadbare blanket tighter around Nikos, feeling the unnatural heat radiating from his small body, even through the fabric. 104.3 degrees. The digital thermometer had blinked the number at her 20 minutes ago, and it hadn't dropped despite the lukewarm bath. The infant acetaminophen, the desperate prayers whispered into his damp curls. 18 months old, and he was burning up from the inside out. Shh, baby, Mama's here. Her voice cracked on the words. The studio apartment's single window rattled in its frame as February wind howled through the Chicago streets below. The radiator had been broken for 3 days. The landlord wasn't returning calls. She'd stuffed towels along the window ledge, but the cold still crept in like an unwelcome visitor, wrapping around them both. Nikos whimpered, his eyes glassy and unfocused. Those eyes, deep brown, almost black, framed by thick lashes that any woman would envy. Her eyes were hazel. His father's eyes were the color of Mediterranean nights, dark and fathomless and dangerous. She pushed the thought away, but it clawed back immediately. The fever wouldn't break. She'd tried everything in her arsenal, every trick she'd learned in nursing school, every intervention she'd performed in the pediatric ER during her rotations. Nothing was working. His little chest rose and fell too rapidly, his breathing shallow and strained. She pressed her lips to his forehead and tasted salt and fear. This wasn't just a fever anymore. This was something worse. The responsible thing would be to call 911, to let the paramedics rush him to Northwestern or Rush, to trust the system she'd worked within for years. But Chloe Hughes had learned the hard way that systems had cracks, and people fell through them all the time. People like her. People who were hiding. She glanced at her phone on the kitchen counter. The screen was cracked from when she'd dropped it last month, spiderwebbing across the glass like her fracturing composure. Her checking account balance glowed in her mind. $473. Her next shift at the urgent care clinic wasn't until Friday. It was Monday. The ER bill alone would bankrupt her, and the payment plans would follow her for years, anchoring her to this city, this life, this carefully constructed anonymity. But none of that mattered if Nikos died in her arms. She laid him gently in the portable crib she'd wedged between her bed and the kitchenette, tucking the blanket around him even though his skin was scorching. He didn't cry. That was what terrified her most. For the past 6 hours, he'd barely made a sound, just those awful, shallow whimpers that didn't sound like her vibrant, babbling boy at all. Chloe walked to the window and stared out at the street below. Snow had started to fall, fat flakes that dissolved on contact with the pavement. A couple hurried past, wrapped in matching scarves, laughing about something. Normal people living normal lives, unburdened by the weight of impossible choices. She'd been one of them once, before Athens, before Andreas. Her phone was in her hand before she'd consciously decided to pick it up. Muscle memory, maybe. Or instinct. The same instinct that had kept her alive when she'd fled Greece with nothing but a positive pregnancy test and a one-way ticket to America. She scrolled through her contacts. The list was pathetically short. Vanessa from work. Her landlord. The clinic's main line. Poison control. Saved after a scare when Nikos had grabbed a cleaning bottle. And then, at the very bottom, the number she'd told herself 1,000 times to delete. A C. Not his full name, never his full name, even in the privacy of her own phone. As if 2 initials could somehow contain the enormity of Andreas Constantine, as if reducing him to letters could make him less real, less omnipresent, less the gravitational force that had pulled her into his orbit and nearly destroyed her in the process. She'd saved the number 18 months ago, right before she'd boarded the plane at Athens International Airport. Just in case, she'd told herself. Emergencies only. This qualified. Chloe's thumb hovered over the screen. Once she made this call, there would be no going back. Andreas Constantine didn't do half measures. He didn't negotiate. He didn't forgive. And he sure as hell didn't forget. She looked back at Nikos. His lips had taken on a faint blue tinge. Her thumb descended. The line rang once, twice. It was 4 a.m. in Chicago, which meant it was 11 a.m. in Athens. He'd be awake. Andreas never slept past dawn, something about the quiet hours giving him an edge, time to think while his enemies were still unconscious and vulnerable. 3 rings, 4. Maybe he'd changed his number. Maybe this line was dead, disconnected, a ghost of the life she'd left behind. Maybe... Chloe. His voice hit her like a physical blow. Deep, accented, absolutely certain. Not a question, not a greeting, just her name, spoken like a fact, like he'd been expecting this call for 18 months and had simply been waiting for her to catch up to the inevitable. Her breath caught. Andreas? Silence stretched between them, an ocean of unspoken words. She heard background noise on his end, male voices speaking rapid Greek, the rustle of papers, the distant sound of traffic. He was working. Of course he was working. Andreas Constantine was always working, always maneuvering, always 3 steps ahead of everyone else. I told myself I would not be surprised when you finally called. His English was perfect, flavored with just enough accent to remind her of late nights on his terrace overlooking the Acropolis, of whispered conversations that had felt like sharing secrets with the devil himself. Yet here I am, surprised. I need help. The words tasted like ashes. Clearly. A pause. Where are you? Chicago. Still running then? It wasn't a question, so she didn't answer. Nikos made a sound, a thin, reedy whine that barely carried across the room, but might as well have been a siren. Andreas heard it. She knew because the quality of his silence changed, sharpening into something predatory. What was that? Chloe closed her eyes. This was it. The moment she'd fled from, the truth she'd carried for 18 months like a bomb waiting to detonate. My son, he's sick. Your son. Andreas repeated the words slowly, tasting them. How old? She could lie, should lie. But what was the point? He'd know the moment he saw Nikos. Those eyes, that thick dark hair, the stubborn set of his jaw, even at 18 months old, pure Andreas Constantine, miniature but unmistakable. 18 months. The silence that followed was absolute. She could picture him in her mind's eye, standing perfectly still, his expression unreadable, that dangerous intelligence working through the mathematics of her departure and the timing of this child. Andreas was many things, ruthless, calculating, terrifying when crossed, but he wasn't stupid. When he spoke again, his voice was very, very quiet. Tell me what is wrong with him. Fever, 104.3, rapid breathing, lethargic. I've given him acetaminophen, kept him hydrated, monitored his oxygen saturation with a pulse ox I borrowed from work. Nothing's helping. He needs a hospital, but I can't. Her voice broke. I can't afford it. And if I take him to the ER, there'll be records and I just... Address. It was a command, not a request. She gave it to him. The words felt like surrender. Do not move. Do not call anyone else. Do not take him anywhere. Each sentence was a bullet. I will handle this. Andreas, you're in Greece. You can't just... I have a plane. Of course he did. I can be wheels down at O'Hare in 9 hours, but that is too long. I will send someone closer. Send someone? Alarm bells rang in her mind. Who? People I trust. Your people, she laughed, the sound bitter. Your criminals, you mean. My family. The correction was razor sharp. And they will keep your son alive until I arrive. Unless you would prefer to continue this debate while he deteriorates? Nikos whimpered again, louder this time. Chloe turned to look at him. His small chest was heaving now, working too hard for air. Medical training overrode everything else. Send them. They will be there within the hour. There is a doctor, Dimitri Kostas. He is discreet. Discreet. The word dripped with implications. Chloe. Andreas's voice changed, losing some of its edge. Not softer exactly, but more focused. Like he was looking directly at her through the phone, through the distance, through 18 months of silence. I do not know why you ran. I do not know why you chose to hide this from me, but I know you, and I know you would not call me unless you had exhausted every other option. So let me help. Let me send the doctor, and then, when I arrive, you and I will discuss the rest. The rest? As if their history could be summarized so simply. As if the fact that she'd fled Greece while pregnant with his child was just a minor detail to be ironed out over coffee. Okay, she whispered. Keep him cool, monitor his breathing. If it worsens before Dimitri arrives, call me back immediately. Okay. Chloe. He paused. What is his name? She shouldn't tell him. It would make this real, would transform the abstract concept of her son into a living, breathing person with Andreas Constantine's blood in his veins. But she was so tired, and Nikos was so sick, and the lies had become too heavy to carry. Nikos. The silence stretched so long she thought the connection had dropped. Then, Nikolaos? Yes. It was the Greek form, the traditional version. She'd chosen it deliberately, a quiet acknowledgement of the heritage she could hide from the world but not from herself. I will see you soon, Chloe. Both of you. He ended the call. She stood there, phone pressed to her ear, even after the line went dead, feeling the foundation of her carefully constructed life crack and shift beneath her feet. She'd built this existence brick by brick. The nursing degree finished online while pregnant, the studio apartment in a neighborhood where people minded their own business, the job at an urgent care clinic that paid cash under the table for weekend shifts, the anonymity of being just another struggling single mother in a city of millions. All of it was about to come crashing down. Because Andreas Constantine didn't do anything halfway. She knew that. Had known it the first night she'd met him, when he'd walked into the charity gala in Athens like he owned not just the room, but the entire city. She'd been waitressing, working for the catering company to make extra money during her year abroad. He'd been holding court, surrounded by men in expensive suits who laughed too loud at his jokes, and women who watched him like prey eyeing a predator they couldn't help but approach. Their eyes had met across the room, and everything had changed. No, she couldn't think about that now. Couldn't let herself remember the way he'd cornered her in the gallery, the way his hand had felt on her lower back, the way he'd spoken to her like she was the only person in the world who mattered. Those memories were dangerous. They made her forget why she'd run. Nikos cried out, a sharp sound of distress that jolted her back to the present. Chloe moved to the crib, lifting him carefully. He was so hot, too hot. She carried him to the bathroom, turned on the sink, let the water run cool. She dampened a washcloth and pressed it gently to his forehead, his cheeks, the back of his neck. It's okay, baby. Help is coming. Mama's got you. You're going to be okay. She repeated it like a mantra, like speaking the words could make them true. 53 minutes later, someone knocked on her door. Chloe had been watching the street from her window, so she'd seen them arrive. 3 black SUVs with tinted windows, parking in formation like a military convoy. Men had emerged, dressed in dark suits despite the cold, moving with the kind of coordination that spoke of training. Security. Andreas's people. She'd watched one of them, older, carrying a leather bag, approach her building while the others took positions around the perimeter. Watching. Guarding. As if her shabby apartment building in this shabby neighborhood was suddenly Fort Knox. The knock came again, firm but not aggressive. Chloe adjusted her grip on Nikos and opened the door. The man on her threshold was in his 60s, gray-haired and compact, with the calm demeanor of someone who'd seen everything and been surprised by none of it. His eyes, sharp and assessing, swept over her and then immediately dropped to Nikos. Ms. Hughes, I am Dr. Dimitri Kostas. Mr. Constantine sent me. His accent was thicker than Andreas's, his English more formal. Chloe stepped back to let him enter. He moved past her into the apartment, and she caught the scent of expensive cologne and antiseptic. May I? He gestured toward Nikos. She should ask for credentials, should demand proof that this man was actually a doctor and not just another criminal in Andreas's vast network. But Nikos was burning up in her arms, and the doctor was already opening his bag, pulling out instruments with the efficiency of long practice. Put him down on the bed, please. Chloe complied. Dr. Kostas washed his hands in her kitchen sink, dried them on a paper towel, and then approached Nikos with the gentle competence of someone who'd been treating children for decades. He checked the boy's temperature. 104. One now, marginally better. Listened to his chest, examined his throat, his ears, palpated his abdomen. Nikos whimpered but didn't fight. He was too exhausted. "How long has the fever been this high?" Dr. Kostas asked, pulling out a stethoscope. "About 7 hours. It started yesterday afternoon but spiked tonight." "Any vomiting? Diarrhea?" "No." "Rash?" "No." "Recent illness? Exposure to anyone sick?" "There was a stomach bug going through the daycare last week, but he didn't catch it. Or I thought he didn't." Dr. Kostas nodded, continuing his examination. He was thorough, checking reflexes, responsiveness, fontanelle tension. Finally, he straightened. "It is viral. Influenza most likely, though without a proper test I cannot be certain. The fever is high but not yet dangerous. His lungs are clear, no pneumonia, but he is dehydrated and needs monitoring." Relief flooded through her so intensely that her knees went weak. "So he'll be okay?" "With proper care, yes. I will start an IV for fluids and give him something to bring the fever down more effectively." He glanced around the apartment, taking in the broken radiator, the drafty window, the general state of barely controlled poverty. His expression didn't change, but Chloe felt the judgment anyway. She lifted her chin. "I'm a nurse. I can monitor him." "I do not doubt your competence, Ms. Hughes, but Mr. Constantine has instructed me to remain until he arrives." Of course he had. Andreas never left anything to chance. Dr. Kostas set up a pediatric IV line with practiced ease, hanging the fluid bag from a coat hook she'd mounted on the wall. Nikos barely stirred as the needle went in. He was too exhausted to fight. Within minutes, clear fluid was dripping into his tiny vein, and the doctor had administered medication that would work faster than anything she could have given orally. There. He should begin to improve within the hour. "Thank you." The words felt inadequate, but they were all she had. Dr. Kostas packed up his bag, leaving behind supplies, more IV fluids, medications, sterile equipment. "I will be outside if you need me, but I believe the worst has passed." He left as quietly as he'd arrived. Through the window, Chloe watched him rejoin the men by the SUVs. They didn't leave. Just stood there, sentries in expensive suits, making her rundown block look like the set of a crime movie. Her neighbors would notice. Of course they'd notice. Mrs. Chen across the hall, who ran a cash-only alterations business out of her apartment. The college students upstairs who threw parties every weekend. The guy on the first floor who dealt weed and minded his own business. They'd all see the SUVs, the guards, the obvious display of money and power. Her anonymity was already evaporating. Chloe sat beside Nikos, stroking his damp hair. His breathing had already begun to slow, evening out into something more normal. The medication was working. He was going to be okay. But she wasn't. Because Andreas was coming. She tried to imagine the conversation they'd have. Tried to prepare herself for the rage that would follow the revelation that he had a son he'd known nothing about. Andreas Constantine didn't tolerate deception. Didn't forgive betrayal. She'd seen what happened to people who crossed him, hadn't witnessed the violence directly, but she'd heard the whispers, seen the fear in the eyes of men who owed him money or loyalty or both. What would he do to the woman who'd stolen 18 months of fatherhood? The hours crept past. Nikos's fever broke around sunrise, dropping to 100.2. He nursed a bottle, keeping the fluids down. Color returned to his cheeks. By 8 a.m., he was sleeping peacefully, looking like himself again instead of a frighteningly fragile imitation. Chloe hadn't slept, couldn't. She sat by the window watching the street, drinking terrible instant coffee and waiting for the other shoe to drop. It dropped at 10:47 a.m. The SUVs that had been parked outside were joined by others, a convoy that stretched down the block. Sleek, black, expensive vehicles that looked like they belonged to a head of state, not a man who technically didn't exist in any official capacity. Andreas Constantine had no public profile, no Wikipedia page, no social media presence. He was a ghost who moved billions of dollars and controlled half the shipping in the Mediterranean through a network of legitimate businesses and less legitimate arrangements. And he was about to walk into her apartment. Chloe stood, smoothing down her wrinkled scrubs. She was still wearing yesterday's clothes. She caught her reflection in the small mirror by the door. She looked exactly like what she was, exhausted, terrified, backed into a corner with no way out. The knock, when it came, was different from Dr. Costas's. Heavier, more assured. She opened the door. Andreas Constantine stood in her doorway like a dark angel, all 6 feet 3 inches of him, dressed in black slacks and a charcoal coat that probably cost more than her annual rent. His hair was shorter than she remembered, cropped close in a style that emphasized the sharp angles of his face. Those eyes, God, those eyes, locked onto hers with an intensity that stole her breath. He looked exactly the same. No, he looked harder, sharper, like the past 18 months had honed him into an even more dangerous version of himself. Chloe. Her name on his lips was a complete sentence, accusation and greeting and possession all at once. She stepped back. Andreas. He moved into the apartment, and suddenly the space felt impossibly small. He dominated it without trying, his presence too large for the shabby walls. His gaze swept the room, cataloging everything: the broken radiator, the makeshift kitchen, the portable crib where Nico slept. Andreas moved toward the crib like a man drawn by gravity. Chloe's heart hammered. She wanted to stop him, to stand between him and Nikos, to protect her son from the reality that was about to crash down on all of them. But her feet wouldn't move. Andreas looked down at the sleeping child. The silence stretched so long it became unbearable. Then Andreas reached out, slowly, carefully, like he was approaching something precious and breakable, and brushed his fingers against Nikos's cheek. The boy stirred but didn't wake, just made a soft sound and shifted under his blanket. "He has my eyes," Andreas said quietly. "Yes." "My hair." "Yes." "My—" His voice caught, actually caught. Andreas Constantine, who negotiated with warlords and politicians without blinking, who'd built an empire on ice-cold control, sounded like someone had punched him in the chest. "He is mine." It wasn't a question, but Chloe answered anyway. "Yes." Andreas turned to look at her, and the expression on his face made her step back instinctively. It wasn't anger. Anger she could have handled. This was something rawer, more dangerous. Betrayal and wonder and fury, and something else she couldn't name, all warring for dominance. "You took him from me." "I left." "You were pregnant." "Yes." "And you did not tell me." "No." "Why?" The single word was a blade. Chloe wrapped her arms around herself. "Because you would have trapped me." "Trapped you." He repeated the words like they were in a foreign language. "I offered you everything." "You offered me a cage." The words came out sharper than she'd intended. 18 months of justification and fear and loneliness compressed into a single sentence. "A beautiful cage, but a cage nonetheless. You don't love people, Andreas. You collect them, control them, own them. And so you stole my son." "I protected him." "From his father." Andreas moved closer, each step deliberate. "From me. From your world." She held her ground even though every instinct screamed at her to retreat. From bullets and bodyguards and enemies who would use a child as leverage. From growing up thinking that power and fear are the same as love. "You think I would not have protected him?" His voice dropped to something lethal. "You think I would have allowed any harm to come to my son? I think you would have suffocated us both." Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "I think you would have turned me into a prisoner in a penthouse and him into an heir to an empire built on blood. I think you would have loved him fiercely and ruined him completely, because that's what you do, Andreas. You take beautiful things and you twist them into weapons." He stared at her. "You truly believe that?" "I lived it. You lived 6 months of falling in love with me and then ran before we could build something real." "We were never going to build something real." The words exploded out of her. "You don't do real, Andreas. You do possession, and I wasn't going to raise my son in that. Our son." He bit off each word. "Nikolaos is our son, Chloe. Not yours alone. And you had no right to make that choice without me." He was right. She knew he was right, but she'd made the choice anyway, and she'd live with it. "I know," she said quietly. Andreas looked like he wanted to argue more, to tear apart her reasoning with the surgical precision he applied to everything. But then Nikos stirred, making a small sound of waking. Both of them froze. The boy's eyes opened, those dark, dark eyes that were pure Andreas, and he looked around with the confused expression of a child waking in the middle of the day. His gaze landed on Chloe first, and he smiled, reaching for her. "Mama." She moved to the crib, lifting him carefully. The IV had been removed hours ago, and his fever was gone. He looked like himself again, healthy, alert, beautiful. "Hi, baby. How do you feel?" Nikos pressed his face against her shoulder, then turned his head to peer at the stranger in the room. Andreas hadn't moved, hadn't spoken. He was staring at Nikos like a man witnessing a miracle and a catastrophe simultaneously. The boy studied him with a toddler's frank curiosity, taking in the dark clothes, the sharp features, the intense focus. Then he smiled, that wide, gap-toothed grin that could light up a room, and reached out one small hand toward Andreas. The sound Andreas made was barely human. He closed the distance in 2 strides, bringing himself close enough that Nikos could touch him. The boy patted Andreas's cheek with chubby fingers, babbling something incomprehensible. Andreas stood absolutely still, like he was afraid any movement would shatter the moment. "He trusts easily," Chloe said softly. Like his mother, Andreas's eyes never left Nikos. "You trusted me once. Once. Before you ran. Before I learned better." Andreas finally looked at her, his expression unreadable. "I am not leaving here without him, Chloe." Fear spiked through her. "You can't just take him." "I can. I have lawyers, resources. I could have a custody suit filed within the hour and a judgment within the week." His voice was matter-of-fact, which made the threat more terrifying. "I could take him to Greece where you would never see him again. I could do many things." "Please," the word was ash in her mouth. "Please don't." "But I will not." He held her gaze. "Because despite what you believe, I do not wish to cause him harm, and taking him from his mother would harm him." Relief was dizzying. "Thank you." "I am not finished." Andreas reached out, touching Nikos's hand where it still rested against his face. The boy grabbed his finger, holding on with surprising strength. "You will come with me, both of you, to my home here in Chicago." "You have a home in Chicago?" "I have homes in many cities. We will stay there while Nikolaos recovers and while you and I determine how we proceed." "I can't just move in with you." "You can. You will." He said it like a fact. "Consider it protective custody." "I don't need protection." "No." Andreas gestured toward the window, where his guard still stood sentinel. "Do you know why I brought so many men, Chloe? Why I secured this building before I entered? Because my enemies are many, and they are always watching. And now they will know, if they do not already, that Andreas Constantine arrived in Chicago with an army. They will wonder why. They will investigate. And eventually they will discover you. They will discover him." He looked at Nikos. "And they will use that information." Cold dread settled in her stomach. "I've been hidden for 18 months. You have been lucky for 18 months. Luck ends." His tone gentled slightly. "I can protect you. I can protect him. But only if you let me." It was the same argument he'd made in Athens, dressed up in different words, the same gilded cage, just with a prettier lock. But this time she had Nikos to think about. This time it wasn't just her freedom on the line. "How long?" she asked. "Until he is well. Until we have reached an understanding about custody and co-parenting." He paused. "Until I know you will not run again. I'm not going to sign away my rights. I am not asking you to, but we will formalize this, Chloe. We will create an arrangement that protects all of us. Legal, binding, fair." Fair. She almost laughed. Nothing about Andreas Constantine was fair. But Nikos was grinning at him, still holding his finger, completely oblivious to the tension crackling between his parents. And the apartment was cold, and her bank account was nearly empty, and the medical bills from Dr. Costas would come eventually, and she was so tired of running. "1 week," she said. "I'll stay 1 week, and then we figure out what happens next." 1 week, Andreas agreed. "To start." He made a call in Greek, rapid and commanding. Within minutes, his men were entering the apartment, packing her belongings with professional efficiency. She watched them box up her life. Nikos's toys, her clothes, the nursing textbooks she'd kept from school. It took less than an hour to dismantle the sanctuary she'd built. Andrea stood by the window, watching the street, one hand resting on the small of her back like he had every right to touch her. Proprietary, possessive, everything she'd fled from. But when Nikos reached for him again, Andreas took the boy without hesitation, holding him with a natural ease that shouldn't have been possible. Nikos settled against his chest like he belonged there, grabbing a fistful of the expensive coat. "He knows," Andreas said quietly. "Knows what?" "That I am his father. Children sense these things." Chloe wanted to argue, but she couldn't, because Nikos did seem comfortable with Andreas in a way he rarely was with strangers. The boy was cautious around new people, clingy with her, slow to warm up. But he'd reach for Andreas immediately, smiled at him, trusted him. Maybe children did sense these things, or maybe genetics ran deeper than she'd wanted to admit. The convoy of SUVs was waiting outside when they descended. Neighbors had gathered, Mrs. Chen peering through her doorway, the college kids filming on their phones, the entire block watching as Andreas Constantine escorted her and Nikos into the middle vehicle. Her old life, exposed in a single morning. The interior of the SUV was luxury she'd forgotten existed. Leather seats, climate control, privacy glass. Andreas sat across from her, Nikos on his lap, looking perfectly at ease, like he'd been holding his son for 18 months instead of 18 minutes. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere safe." That was all he'd give her. Chloe looked out the window as they pulled away from the curb, watching her apartment building recede. She'd lived there for 14 months, had thought she'd stay for years, building a quiet life away from Andreas's world. One phone call had destroyed it all. But Nikos was healthy. That was what mattered. Her son was healthy, and she'd do whatever it took to keep him that way, even if it meant walking back into the arms of the man she'd spent 18 months running from. Andreas caught her looking at him. "You did the right thing," he said, "calling me." "Did I?" "He is alive. That makes it right." She wanted to argue, wanted to point out all the ways this was wrong, dangerous, impossible. But Nikos had fallen asleep against Andreas's chest, one small hand fisted in the expensive fabric, completely at peace. And Chloe realized with sinking certainty that everything had just changed. Not gradually, not over time, but in a single night. The careful boundaries she'd built, the distance she'd maintained, the separate life she'd carved out, all of it was gone. Andreas Constantine had found his son, and he was never, ever going to let either of them go. The house wasn't what Chloe had expected. She'd braced herself for something ostentatious, marble columns, gold fixtures, the kind of aggressive wealth that screamed rather than whispered. Instead, Andreas's Chicago residence was a restored graystone in Lincoln Park, elegant and understated, the kind of property that blended seamlessly into a neighborhood of old money and quiet power. Iron gates opened automatically as their convoy approached, and the SUVs pulled into a private courtyard shielded from the street by mature trees and high brick walls. Andreas carried Nikos out of the vehicle, the boy still sleeping against his shoulder with that complete trust only children possessed. Chloe followed, her legs unsteady after the 40-minute drive through Chicago traffic. She'd watched the city transform through the window, her shabby neighborhood giving way to increasingly polished blocks, the transition from survival to luxury happening in the space of a few miles. "This way." Andreas moved toward the entrance with the confidence of someone who owned not just the house, but the ground it stood on. The front door opened before they reached it, revealing a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair pulled into an immaculate bun. "Mr. Constantine, welcome home." Her accent was Greek, her English precise. Her eyes flickered to Chloe, then to the sleeping child in Andreas's arms, and something shifted in her expression. Recognition, maybe, or calculation. "Maria, this is Chloe Hughes and my son, Nikolaos." Andreas said it simply, without preamble or explanation, as if introducing his secret child was as routine as commenting on the weather. Maria's composure didn't crack, but Chloe saw the slight widening of her eyes. "Your son?" "Yes. Andreas moved past her into the foyer. Please prepare the East bedroom suite. Chloe will need privacy. And have Dr. Costas come by this evening to check on Nikolaos. Of course. Maria turned to Chloe, her expression warming slightly. Welcome, Ms. Hughes. Is there anything I can get for you? Tea? Coffee? I'm fine, thank you. Chloe's voice sounded thin in the cavernous entryway. The house was beautiful in a way that made her acutely aware of her wrinkled scrubs and unwashed hair. Hardwood floors gleamed under ambient lighting. Original artwork lined the walls, not reproductions but real pieces that probably cost more than most people earned in a year. Andreas was already climbing the staircase, Nikos still secure in his arms. Chloe followed, trailing behind like a guest in a museum, afraid to touch anything. The East bedroom suite turned out to be larger than her entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked a private garden. The furniture was modern but warm. A king-sized bed with crisp white linens, a sitting area with a velvet sofa, a door that led to what she assumed was the bathroom. Andreas moved through an adjoining door into a second room, this one clearly meant to be a nursery or child's bedroom. He laid Nikos carefully on the bed, adjusting pillows around him to prevent rolling. The boy stirred but didn't wake, just sighed and settled deeper into sleep. For a long moment, Andreas simply stood there, looking down at his son. Chloe watched from the doorway, unable to move, unable to look away from the expression on his face. She'd seen Andreas negotiate million-dollar deals without blinking. She'd seen him dismiss men with a single glance. She'd never seen him look vulnerable before. He is perfect, Andreas said quietly. Yes. You did well, raising him alone. The unexpected praise made her throat tight. I did what I had to do. You should not have had to do it alone. He turned to face her, and the vulnerability was gone, replaced by something harder. But that is my fault, as much as yours. Your fault? I made you afraid. He said it plainly, without defensiveness. In Athens, I moved too fast, pushed too hard. I saw what I wanted and I took it without asking if you wanted the same thing. Chloe stared at him. Are you actually admitting you were wrong? I am admitting I made tactical errors. A slight smile ghosted across his mouth. I am a possessive man, Chloe. I do not apologize for that. But I should have realized that possession without consent is just another word for imprisonment. That's the closest thing to an apology I've ever heard from you. Then treasure it. You will likely not hear another. He moved toward her, each step deliberate. But I want you to understand something. What happened in Athens, the way I claimed you, the way I wanted to keep you, that has not changed. I still want those things. I still want you. Her breath caught. Andreas, but I have learned patience. He stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, that familiar scent of cedar and something darker. I will not force you into my life. I will not trap you. But I will not let you run again either. We will find a balance, for his sake. He glanced back at Nikos. And perhaps, eventually, for ours. There is no ours. The words came out weaker than she'd intended. No? Andreas reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. The touch was gentle, almost tender, and it sent electricity racing down her spine. Then why did you keep my number all these months? Why did you name him Nikolaos? Why did you call me when you had nowhere else to turn? Because you were the only person with the resources to help. Liar. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. You called me because some part of you has always known that you belong to me, just as I belong to you, just as our son binds us together in ways that cannot be undone. Belonging isn't love, Andreas. No, but it is a start. He dropped his hand, stepping back. Get some rest. Shower. Maria will bring you clothes. I will watch Nikolaos. I can watch my own son, our son, and I have 18 months to make up for. His tone brooked no argument. Let me begin now. Chloe wanted to fight, wanted to establish boundaries, to prove she wasn't going to be swept into his orbit again. But exhaustion was pulling at her bones, and the thought of a hot shower in what was undoubtedly a spectacular bathroom was too tempting to resist. Fine. 1 hour. Take 2. Andreas returned to the child's room, settling into a chair beside the bed where Nikos slept. He looked utterly natural there, like he'd been keeping vigil over sleeping children his entire life instead of running a criminal empire. Chloe retreated into the bathroom and nearly wept at what she found. Marble everywhere, a rainfall shower that could fit 4 people, heated floors, fluffy towels stacked on warming racks. Luxury she'd forgotten existed during her months of scraping by. She stripped off her scrubs and stood under water hot enough to scald, letting 18 months of tension drain away. She'd been so careful, so cautious, building a life one minimum wage paycheck at a time, always looking over her shoulder, always ready to run if Andreas's people got too close. And then Nikos had gotten sick, and all her careful planning had crumbled in the face of maternal terror. When she finally emerged, wrapped in a robe that was softer than anything she'd worn in a year, she found clothes laid out on the bed. Designer labels, perfectly sized, in styles she would have chosen for herself. Either Maria was exceptionally good at her job, or Andreas had remembered exactly what Chloe liked to wear. She suspected it was the latter. She dressed in black leggings and a cashmere sweater that felt like a cloud against her skin, then padded barefoot back to the child's room. Andreas was exactly where she'd left him, but now he was reading from his phone in Greek, his voice a low murmur. Nikos had turned toward the sound, still sleeping but clearly comforted by it. "Greek lullabies?" she asked from the doorway. "Business reports." Andreas didn't look up. "But he seems to find them soothing." Despite everything, Chloe smiled. "He's used to me reading nursing journals out loud while he plays. I think he just likes voices. He will learn Greek properly. He'll learn whatever he wants to learn. He is a Constantine. He will know his heritage." Andreas finally looked at her, his gaze sweeping over her appearance. "You look better. I feel almost human again. Come, sit." He gestured to a second chair that had been brought in. "We should talk." Chloe sat, maintaining careful distance between them. "About what?" "Everything." Andreas set his phone aside. "But we will start with the practical matters. You cannot go back to your apartment. I figured as much. You will stay here. I have security that cannot be breached, protection that extends beyond these walls. Nikolaos will be safe." "And what about my job? My life?" "What life, Chloe?" He said it gently, but the words still stung. "You were working illegal shifts at an urgent care clinic for cash under the table. You were living in an apartment with a broken radiator that you could barely afford. You had no friends, no support system, no safety net. That is not a life. That is survival. Was my survival. My choice. And you chose poorly." He held up a hand before she could argue. "I understand why. I understand you were afraid. But poverty does not equal freedom, and struggling alone does not make you strong. It just makes you tired." "So what? I'm supposed to let you fix everything? Let you pay for everything?" "Yes." He said it simply. "I am obscenely wealthy, Chloe. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. Let me use it to make your life easier, to make his life better." "In exchange for what?" "Access." Andreas looked at Nikos. "I want to know my son. I want to be present in his life, not as a stranger who sends money, but as his father." "You live in Greece?" "I live everywhere. I have homes in Athens, London, New York, here. I travel constantly for business, but I will make time. I will rearrange my schedule. I will be present." He met her eyes. "I give you my word." "Your word." She wanted to scoff, but there was something in his expression that stopped her. "And what happens when your world comes crashing in? When your enemies decide Nikos is a target? Then I will destroy them." He said it matter-of-factly, like discussing the weather. "Completely, without mercy. Anyone who threatens what is mine learns very quickly to regret it." "That's not reassuring, Andreas. That's terrifying." "Good. It should be. Because I need you to understand the reality of who I am." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I am not a good man, Chloe. I have done things that would horrify you. I operate in shadows and gray areas. I make deals with people you would cross the street to avoid. But I protect what is mine with absolute ruthlessness. And Nikolaos is mine, as are you. I'm not yours. You are the mother of my son. That makes you mine in every way that matters. His voice dropped. But more than that, you are the woman I let slip away once. I will not make that mistake again. This isn't Athens. You can't just declare ownership and expect me to comply. No, but I can make you an offer. Andreas sat back. Live here. Let me provide for you and Nikolaos. In exchange, I want shared custody. Legal, formal, binding. When I am in Chicago, I see him. When I travel, you can choose to come with me or stay here, but I will have regular video calls. And when he is old enough, he will spend time in Greece, learning about his other heritage. That's not an offer, that's a demand. It is a negotiation, so negotiate. He spread his hands. What do you want, Chloe? Name it. She stared at him. You're serious. Completely. You want independence? I will give you access to funds, not controlled by me, in your own name. You want education? I will pay for you to finish any degree you want. You want space? This house is large enough that we can live separate lives under the same roof. Tell me what you need, and I will provide it. But I will not be shut out of my son's life. That is non-negotiable. Chloe's mind raced. This was Andreas Constantine at his most dangerous. Not angry, not threatening, but coldly logical. Presenting options that looked like freedom, but were really just longer leashes. And yet, what choice did she have? He was right about her life. She'd been barely surviving, one illness or accident away from complete disaster. I want guarantees, she said finally. Name them. If I'm living here, I need my own space. A room for me, a room for Nikos, and you don't enter without permission. Agreed. I want access to my own money, not an allowance, a real account with real funds that I control. I will transfer $1 million tomorrow, more if you need it. She blinked. 1 million? That's insane. That is barely pocket change, Chloe. I made more than that in the time it took us to drive here. He waved it away. What else? I want legal protection. If something happens to you, I want custody of Nikos guaranteed. No relatives swooping in to claim him. Andreas's expression darkened. My family in Greece is extensive and predatory. I agree completely. I will have papers drawn up immediately. If I die, Nikolaos goes to you, with a trust that ensures he is provided for. And I want the right to leave. She said it firmly, even though her voice shook. If this doesn't work, if I feel unsafe or trapped, I can take Nikos and go. No legal battles, no custody fights. No! His response was immediate and absolute. Andreas, no, Chloe. I will give you almost anything, but I will not give you permission to steal my son again. He stood, towering over her. You want to leave? Leave. I will not stop you. But Nikolaos stays and we go to court, and I promise you that I have better lawyers and more resources and I will win. That's not fair. Life is not fair. But I am being more generous than you deserve. His eyes flashed. You took 18 months from me. 18 months I will never get back. I did not see him born. I did not hear his first word or watch his first steps. I missed everything because you decided I was not worthy of being his father. I was protecting him. You were protecting yourself. Andreas's control finally cracked. You were afraid I would consume you, so you ran. But you did not just run from me, Chloe. You ran from us, from what we could have built together, and you took my son to justify it. That's not true, isn't it? He moved closer, his presence overwhelming. Tell me honestly, did you think about me? In the past 18 months, did you think about what I might feel? Did you consider that perhaps I deserved to know I had created a child? Or was it easier to paint me as a monster so you could sleep at night? Tears burned in her eyes. You scared me. I know. His voice gentled. And that is my burden to carry, but you cannot keep punishing me for sins I might have committed. Give me a chance, Chloe. Let me prove I can be the father Nikolaos deserves. A sound from the bed interrupted them. Nikos was stirring, making small, waking up noises. Andreas moved immediately, reaching the bedside before Chloe could stand. He lifted the boy gently, cradling him with surprising competence. Nikos blinked sleepy eyes, looked at Andreas, and smiled. Up. You are up, little one. Andreas's entire demeanor transformed, all the harsh edges smoothing into something tender. How do you feel? Good. Nikos's vocabulary was limited but enthusiastic. He patted Andreas's face again, that same curious exploration from earlier. Mama? I am here, baby. Chloe moved to join them, and Nikos reached for her, wanting both of them. They stood there, awkwardly close, each holding one of the boy's hands. This was her life now. This strange, impossible triangle. I will agree to your terms, she said quietly, except the part about leaving. We need to negotiate that. We will table it. Andreas watched Nikos, not her. For now, we focus on him, on making sure he is healthy and happy. The rest can wait. It was an agreement, but it was a reprieve. Chloe would take it. Maria appeared in the doorway, her timing impeccable. Dinner's ready, Mr. Constantine. I have prepared something light for the little one as well. Thank you, Maria. Andreas shifted Nikos to his hip with the ease of someone who'd been holding children his entire life. Come, Chloe. You must be hungry. She was. Starving, actually. The adrenaline of the past 24 hours had burned through every calorie she had. Dinner was served in a dining room that could have seated 20 but had been set intimately for 3. Maria had prepared Greek dishes, lamb, roasted vegetables, fresh bread, and for Nikos, plain pasta with butter and steamed carrots cut into small pieces. The boy ate enthusiastically, making a mess and chattering in his limited vocabulary, completely oblivious to the tension between his parents. Andreas watched him with the focus of someone memorizing every detail. He asked questions, what foods Nikos liked, what his schedule was, whether he had any allergies. Chloe answered, providing information like a physician giving a medical history, clinical, safe. But when Nikos reached for Andreas's water glass and Andreas automatically moved it out of range, then offered his own glass with water at the right temperature, she saw the instinct there. Protective, paternal, real. Maybe he could be a good father. Maybe. After dinner, Nikos wanted to play. Andreas took him to a room on the second floor that had clearly been converted into a temporary playroom in the hours they'd been there. New toys still in packaging, books, soft mats on the floor. It was excessive and thoughtful in equal measure. Chloe sat on the floor, watching Andreas attempt to build a block tower while Nikos knocked it down, giggling maniacally. The scene was so domestic it hurt. This could have been their life all along if she hadn't run. If she'd trusted him, if he'd been different, if. He has your laugh, Andreas said, glancing at her. He has your stubbornness. Then he is doomed to be impossibly difficult. But Andreas was smiling, and it transformed his face into something younger, less burdened. They played until Nikos started rubbing his eyes, the universal signal for exhaustion. Chloe started to reach for him, but Andreas was already lifting the boy. Bath time? He asked. He had one this morning, but a quick one wouldn't hurt. Andreas carried Nikos to the bathroom attached to the child's room. Someone, Maria probably, had stocked it with everything a toddler could need: baby soap, soft towels, bath toys. Andreas ran the water, testing the temperature with his wrist before setting Nikos in. You know what you are doing, Chloe observed from the doorway. I have a niece, my sister's daughter. I was present for her childhood. He soaped Nikos's hair gently, supporting the boy's head. Before you ask, my sister lives in Athens. She is one of the few family members I trust. Will you tell her about Nikos? I already did, while you were showering. He rinsed the soap away. She is furious with you for hiding him, and furious with me for apparently being such a terror that you felt you had to run. She has invited herself to visit next week. Andreas, you will like Elena. She is the only person in the world not afraid of me. He lifted Nikos from the bath, wrapping him in a towel. And she will likely become your fiercest ally. She has been lecturing me about my relationship failures for years. Chloe helped dress Nikos in pajamas, soft cotton printed with cartoon animals. The boy was already half asleep, worn out from fever and excitement, and too much stimulation. Story? Nikos mumbled. Of course. Andreas carried him to the bed, settling them both against the headboard. He looked at Chloe. Will you read to him? She selected a book from the shelf, Goodnight Moon, a classic, and curled up on the other side of Nikos. The three of them, together, reading a story about saying goodnight to the world. It was painfully normal, painfully perfect. Nikos fell asleep before she reached the end, his breathing evening out into the deep rhythm of childhood slumber. Chloe carefully extracted herself, but Andreas remained, holding their son, looking down at him with an expression she couldn't decipher. "I will stay tonight," he said quietly. "In the chair. In case he wakes." "Andreas, you don't have to." "I want to." He met her eyes. "I have lost 18 months. I will not lose another night." There was no arguing with that kind of determination. Chloe retreated to her own room, climbing into the enormous bed that felt too soft after months on a worn mattress. She should sleep, should rest, but her mind wouldn't quiet. She'd made a deal with the devil tonight, traded her independence for security, her freedom for protection. But as she lay there in the darkness, she couldn't shake the memory of Andreas's face when he'd looked at Nikos. The wonder, the pain, the love. Maybe he wasn't a devil after all. Maybe he was just a man who'd been given something precious and didn't know how to hold it without crushing it. Or maybe that was just wishful thinking. Chloe closed her eyes, but sleep was a long time coming. And when it finally arrived, she dreamed of Athens, of moonlight on marble, of strong hands and dangerous promises, of a life she'd almost lived before fear had driven her away. In the room next door, Andreas sat vigil over his sleeping son, memorizing every feature, every breath, every small movement. He'd meant what he'd told Chloe. He would not lose another moment, would not let her run again, would not fail at this. He had built an empire through strategy and ruthlessness. Surely he could navigate fatherhood. Surely he could find a way to keep them both, his son and the woman who'd given him life. Surely he could become the man they needed him to be. Outside, guards patrolled the perimeter. Inside, a family, fractured but forming, tried to find their footing. And in the morning, the real work would begin. The nightmare began at 3 a.m. with the sound of breaking glass. Chloe jerked awake, her nurse's instinct screaming danger before her conscious mind caught up. She was out of bed and moving toward Nikos's room before she fully understood what she'd heard. The hallway was dark, but she knew the layout well enough now to navigate without light. She'd nearly reached the door when Andreas emerged from the shadows, moving with lethal silence. He was dressed in black, a gun in his hand that he'd produced from somewhere. His entire demeanor transformed from the gentle father of hours ago into something far more dangerous. "Stay here," he commanded, his voice barely a whisper. "Like hell, that's my son in there." "Our son, and he is safe." The glass was downstairs. Andreas pressed something into her hand. Her phone's like, "Lock yourself in his room. If anyone comes through that door who is not me or one of my men, you call the number I am texting you right now, and you do not stop screaming." "Andreas, what's happening?" "Someone breached the perimeter." His expression was granite. "Stay with Nikolaos." He was gone before she could argue, moving down the hallway with the fluid grace of someone trained for violence. Chloe pushed into Nikos's room, her heart hammering. The boy was still asleep, oblivious to the danger. She locked the door, dragged a heavy chair in front of it, and positioned herself between the entrance and the crib. Her phone buzzed. The number Andreas had sent was marked emergency with a Greek flag emoji. She kept it ready, her thumb hovering over the call button. Downstairs, she heard voices, sharp, male, speaking rapid Greek. Then a sound like furniture overturning. A shout. The unmistakable crack of gunfire. Nico stirred, whimpering. Chloe moved to him immediately, lifting him from the crib and retreating to the walk-in closet. She pulled the door nearly closed, leaving just enough gap to see the bedroom entrance, and held her son close. "Shh, baby, Mama's got you. Everything's okay." The lies tasted bitter, but Nico settled against her, his fever-warm body trusting and pliant. More shots, closer now. Chloe's medical training cataloged every sound, the difference between shots fired and shots hitting their target, the timbre of male voices in pain versus anger. She counted seconds, then minutes, her entire world narrowing to the weight of her son in her arms and the terrible silence that followed violence. Then footsteps in the hallway. Heavy, purposeful, multiple people. Chloe's thumb pressed down on the emergency number, ready to call, when Andreas's voice cut through the door. "Chloe, it is me. Unlock the door." She didn't move. Couldn't. Because what if it wasn't him? What if someone had forced him to say those words? Chloe, his voice gentled. I know you are frightened, but I need you to trust me. Nikolaos needs to see that I am unharmed, or he will be afraid. That decided it. She emerged from the closet, Nikos clutched against her chest, and approached the door. Are you alone? No, I have 4 of my men with me, but they will not enter if you do not wish it. She moved the chair, unlocked the door, opened it a crack. Andreas stood there, exactly as he'd promised, flanked by 4 men in tactical gear. There was blood on his knuckles, not his own, she thought, and his expression was carved from ice. Are you hurt? She asked. No. He looked past her to Nikos, who was now awake and staring with wide eyes. Is he? He's fine. Scared, but fine. She opened the door wider. What happened? Later, first we move. Andreas gestured to his men. They will escort you to the safe room. I'm not going anywhere until you tell me what's happening. Chloe planted her feet. Someone just shot up your house with our son inside. I deserve to know why. Andreas studied her for a long moment, then dismissed his men with a curt gesture in Greek. They withdrew, leaving the 3 of them alone in the hallway. He ran a hand through his hair, the first sign of agitation she'd seen. His name is Kostas Papadakis. He runs operations out of New York and has been trying to expand into Chicago for years. I've been blocking him. Andreas's jaw tightened. He found out about you. About Nikolaos. This was a message. Ice flooded Chloe's veins. A message. A warning. He is telling me that he can reach my family, that he knows my weakness now. Andreas looked at Nikos, something terrible and tender crossing his face. He is telling me to negotiate. So negotiate. The words came out sharper than intended. Give him what he wants. It is not that simple. Make it that simple. Chloe shifted Nikos to her other hip. The boy had buried his face against her neck, his small body trembling. I don't care about your territory or your empire or whatever this is about. I care about keeping him safe. As do I, which is why I cannot simply concede to Papadakis. Andreas stepped closer, his voice dropping. If I show weakness, if I negotiate from a position of fear, every enemy I have will know they can manipulate me by threatening what I love. It will never end, Chloe. The attacks will continue until either I am destroyed or I destroy them all. That's insane. That is my world. He said it without apology. And now it is yours as well. Because the moment Papadakis discovered Nikolaos, you both became targets. Moving you somewhere else will not help. He will find you. Hiding will not work. He has resources. The only solution is to end this, permanently. Chloe's stomach turned. You mean kill him? I mean neutralize the threat by whatever means necessary. Andreas reached out, touching Nikos's back with surprising gentleness. I will not lose my son to my enemy's ambitions. I will burn the world before I allow that. You're talking about murder. I'm talking about protection, about ensuring that when Nikolaos grows up, he does not have to fear men like Papadakis. Andreas's eyes met hers. You wanted honesty? Here it is. I have killed before. I will kill again if necessary, and I will not apologize for doing whatever it takes to keep you both safe. Nikos lifted his head, looking between them with confused eyes. Mama sad? Chloe forced a smile, stroking his hair. No, baby, Mama's just tired. Down. He wriggled, wanting to be put down, but she held on tighter. Andreas made a soft sound, then held out his arms. Come here, little one. Let Mama rest her arms. To Chloe's surprise, Nikos reached for him immediately. Andreas took the boy, settling him against his chest, and Nikos relaxed instantly, trusting this near stranger in a way that should have been impossible. He knows you, Chloe said quietly. Children are wiser than adults. They see what is real, not what they fear. Andreas carried Nikos toward the window, keeping well back from the glass. Look, Nikolaos, the sun will rise soon. Do you see the sky changing? It was true. The blackness was fading to deep blue, dawn approaching. Nikos watched with the fascination only small children could muster for everyday miracles. I need to move you both, Andreas said, not looking away from the window. Not far, but somewhere more secure while I handle Papadakis. Where? I have a compound north of the city. Technically a estate, but built like a fortress. 24-hour security, controlled access, safe room that could withstand a siege. He glanced at her. You will hate it. Why? Because it is exactly the kind of gilded cage you accused me of building in Athens. His smile was grim. But it is necessary, just until this is resolved. Chloe wanted to argue, wanted to insist there had to be another way. But she kept seeing the fear in Nikos' eyes when the gunshots had echoed through the house. Kept imagining what would have happened if Andreas' security had failed, if Papadakis' men had reached them. How long? She asked. A week, maybe less if I can force a meeting sooner. And then what? You kill him and move on to the next enemy? If necessary. Andreas turned to face her fully. I will not lie to you, Chloe. This is what my life is. This is what being with me means. Danger and violence and threats that never completely disappear. If you cannot accept that, if you cannot live with it, then I will provide you protection elsewhere. I will ensure you and Nikolaos are safe, but I will not change who I am. I'm not asking you to change. Are you not? He tilted his head. You fled Athens because you were afraid of my world. Now that world has found you anyway, so I'm asking, truly asking, can you accept it? Can you stay? Nikos was playing with Andreas' collar, babbling softly to himself, completely unaware of the weight of the conversation happening around him. Chloe looked at her son, at the man holding him, at the impossible situation she'd found herself in. I don't have a choice, she said finally. You always have a choice. Not really. Because if I leave, you'll fight me for custody. And even if I won, Papadakis would still come after us. You said it yourself, hiding won't work. She crossed her arms. So, yes, I'll go to your fortress. I'll accept your protection, but I'm not doing it for you, Andreas. I'm doing it for him. I know. He didn't look offended. And I am grateful nonetheless. They packed what little they'd brought, though Maria assured them everything they needed would be at the estate. The convoy that assembled in the courtyard was even larger than before, 8 SUVs, all black, all armored. Andreas placed them in the center vehicle, surrounded on all sides by his people. The drive took an hour, heading northwest through Chicago's suburbs and then beyond, into areas where estates sprawled across acres, and neighbors were measured in miles rather than feet. The compound was exactly what Andreas had promised. A sprawling property surrounded by high walls, with guard posts at regular intervals, and technology Chloe couldn't begin to identify monitoring every approach. The main house was beautiful in an austere way, all clean lines and bulletproof glass. Andreas carried Nikos inside and Chloe followed, feeling like she was walking into a maximum security prison disguised as a luxury home. The entire second floor is yours, Andreas said, leading them up a sweeping staircase. 5 bedrooms, private sitting room, library, and a kitchen if you prefer to prepare your own meals. Maria will have staff available, but they will not intrude unless you request them. He showed her to a suite that made the Lincoln Park house look modest. Nikos immediately headed for a toy chest that had been stocked with age-appropriate options, diving in with enthusiasm. I have to leave soon, Andreas said quietly. Meeting with Papadakis has been arranged for tonight. Chloe's head snapped up. Tonight? That's too fast. Speed is necessary. The longer this drags out, the more opportunities he has to strike. Andreas moved closer, his presence overwhelming in the large space. I will end this, Chloe. I promise you. What if you can't? What if he's stronger than you think? Then I will die trying to protect my family. He said it simply without drama. But I do not intend to die. I am very good at what I do. This isn't a negotiation, is it? You're going there to kill him. Andreas was silent for a long moment. I'm going there to offer him one chance, a deal that allows us both to walk away. If he is smart, he will take it. If he is not, he let the implication hang. Andreas, she grabbed his arm. Don't do this, please. There has to be another way. There is not. He covered her hand with his. But I need you to promise me something. If this goes wrong, if I do not return, you will listen to Maria. She knows where the documents are. Custody papers giving you full rights to Nikolaos. access to accounts that will keep you both comfortable. She will get you out of the country if necessary. Stop talking like you're going to die. I am not planning to, but I am also not foolish enough to ignore the possibility. Andreas lifted her hand, pressed his lips to her knuckles. The gesture was old-fashioned, intimate. Take care of our son, and know that everything I do for both of you. He was gone before she could respond, striding out of the room with the confidence of a man walking into battle. Chloe stood there, her hand still tingling from his kiss, her heart in her throat. Nikos looked up from his toys. Dada? The word stopped her heart. What did you say? Dada. He pointed toward the door where Andreas had disappeared. Dada go? Chloe knelt beside him, smoothing his dark hair. Yes, baby. Dada had to go. But he'll come back. She hoped, prayed, even though she'd sworn off prayers long ago. The day passed with agonizing slowness. Maria brought meals that Chloe barely touched. Nikos played, napped, asked for Dada every hour. She distracted him with books and toys and cartoons on the massive television, but nothing could distract her from the knowledge that somewhere in Chicago, Andreas was facing down an enemy who'd already proven willing to attack a home with a child inside. Evening fell. 8 o'clock came and went. 9, 10. Chloe put Nikos to bed, singing him lullabies until he finally drifted off. Then she returned to the sitting room, unable to settle, unable to think about anything except the 1,000 ways this could go wrong. 11 o'clock. Her phone buzzed. A text from Andreas. 3 words. It is done. Relief flooded through her, so intense it made her dizzy. She typed back, Are you okay? I am unharmed. Returning now. 1 hour. She waited in the sitting room, curled on the sofa, watching the minutes tick past. At 12:17 a.m., she heard vehicles in the drive, heard footsteps on the stairs, heard Andreas's voice speaking quiet Greek to someone. Then he was there, standing in the doorway, still dressed in black, looking tired but whole. Alive. Chloe was across the room before she could stop herself, checking him for injuries with hands that shook. You said you weren't hurt. I am not. He caught her hands, holding them still. Breathe, Chloe. Did you kill him? No. Andreas guided her back to the sofa, sitting beside her. I offered him a deal. 20% of my Chicago shipping operations in exchange for a guarantee that my family is untouchable. He accepted. She stared at him. That's it? He just agreed. After I showed him the alternative, Andreas's smile was cold. I had detailed information on his operations, names, locations, financial records. I explained that if he refused my offer, I would destroy everything he had built and ensure he spent the rest of his life in a federal prison. He is greedy, but not stupid. So it's over. The immediate threat is over, but there will be others. He looked at her seriously. This is what I meant, Chloe. This is the reality. I can mitigate dangers, eliminate specific threats, but I cannot make the danger disappear entirely. Not while I remain in this business. Then leave the business. Andreas laughed, the sound harsh. You think it is that simple? I have spent 20 years building what I have. I employ thousands of people. I have agreements with organizations that do not accept resignations. He shook his head. I cannot simply walk away. Not without consequences that would be far worse than any threat Papadakis posed. So we're just supposed to live like this? Always looking over our shoulders? You are supposed to live protected, comfortable, and safe. That is what I can offer. That is what I am offering. Andreas turned to face her fully. I know it is not what you wanted. I know you dreamed of a normal life with a normal man, but I am what I am, and Nikolaos deserves to know his father. So I am asking you again. Can you accept this? Chloe thought about Nikos calling Andreas Dada. Thought about the way her son had reached for him, trusted him, loved him instantly with the uncomplicated devotion only children could manage. Thought about what it would mean to deny her son that relationship because she was afraid. I need conditions, she said. Name them. You don't make decisions about Nikos without consulting me. Ever. Not where he goes to school, not who he spends time with, not anything. She held his gaze. Equal partners in parenting, not you issuing commands and me following them. Agreed. And you find a way to minimize the danger. I don't care how. Legitimize your businesses, cut ties with the worst elements, something, because I will not raise him in a war zone. Andreas was quiet for a long moment. I can do that. It will take time, years perhaps, but I can transition to more legitimate operations. For him. He paused. For both of you. And you don't lie to me, ever. About the dangers, about your business, about anything. I need honesty, Andreas, even when it's ugly. Especially when it is ugly. He reached out, tucking hair behind her ear in that gesture she remembered from Athens. You have my word. No more lies. Okay. She took a shaky breath. Then okay. We try this. We figure out how to be a family, somehow. Somehow, he echoed, and there was something almost vulnerable in his expression. Thank you, Chloe, for giving me this chance. Don't thank me yet. You might hate me by the time I'm done demanding things. I very much doubt that. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. I have been waiting 18 months for you to demand things from me. It is about time you started. The moment stretched between them, charged with all the history and tension and unresolved feelings they'd been dancing around. Chloe was acutely aware of how close he was, of the heat of his body, of the way he was looking at her like she was something precious and dangerous all at once. Andreas, she whispered. I know. He pulled back, standing. You are exhausted, and I am still running on adrenaline from tonight. We should both rest. Tomorrow we can discuss the details of our arrangement. He was giving her space, actually respecting boundaries. The Andreas she'd known in Athens would have pushed, would have taken the moment and turned it into something more. This version, this careful, controlled version, was somehow more dangerous because it made her want to close the distance herself. Good night, Chloe. He paused at the door. I'm glad you are here. Both of you. Even if the circumstances are not ideal. Good night, Andreas. After he left, Chloe checked on Nikos one more time. The boy was sleeping peacefully, his face relaxed and innocent. She stood there in the darkness, watching him breathe, and tried to process everything that had happened in the past 48 hours. Her old life was completely gone. The apartment, the anonymity, the illusion of independence, all of it erased. But Nikos was safe. He had a father who clearly adored him, and she had resources now to give him the life she'd always wanted him to have. Maybe it was worth it. Maybe this gilded cage could become something more. Maybe Andreas could actually change. Or maybe she was just fooling herself. Only time would tell. She climbed into the enormous bed in the master suite, pulled the covers up to her chin, and let exhaustion finally claim her. Her last thought before sleep took her was of Andreas's hands on hers, gentle and sure, and the promise in his eyes that he would protect them no matter the cost. In his own room downstairs, Andreas stood at the window, looking out over the grounds. Security lights illuminated the perimeter. Guards patrolled in shifts. Every entrance was monitored, every approach controlled. His son was asleep upstairs. The woman he'd never stopped wanting was under his roof. And he'd just negotiated peace with an enemy instead of destroying him, because Chloe had asked him to find another way. She was changing him already, making him reconsider tactics he'd used for years, making him think about legacy and example instead of just power and control. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Andreas pulled out his phone, scrolling to a photo Maria had sent earlier. Nikos playing with blocks, completely absorbed in building a tower. His son, his heir, his reason for everything. He would build something better for the boy, would find a way to bridge the gap between the life he'd built and the life Chloe wanted them to have. He had to, because losing them again was not an option. Andreas Constantine had faced down cartels, governments, and rivals who'd tried to destroy him. Surely he could navigate fatherhood and convince one stubborn woman that he was worth the risk. He had to believe that, had to make it true, because the alternative, a life without them, was no longer acceptable. The fragile peace lasted exactly 3 days. Chloe had started to believe they could make this work. Andreas had been attentive but not suffocating, spending hours playing with Nikos, teaching him Greek words, reading to him in that deep voice that made the boy's eyes light up. They'd established a rhythm, breakfast together, mornings where Andreas worked from home while she and Nikos explored the estate, afternoons in the private library where Nikos napped, and she actually had conversations with Andreas that didn't revolve around threats or custody. It felt almost normal, almost like a real family. Then Kostas Papadakis was found dead in his Manhattan penthouse, and everything went to hell. Chloe was reading to Nikos in the library when Andreas appeared in the doorway, his phone pressed to his ear, his expression carved from stone. He was speaking rapid Greek, his tone clipped and dangerous. She recognized that mode, Business Andreas, the version of him that ran an empire and destroyed obstacles. He ended the call, looking at her with eyes that held too many calculations. "What happened?" she asked, even though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. "Papadakis is dead, shot 3 times in his own home, his security disabled, his safe emptied." Andreas moved into the room, his movements controlled but tense. It was made to look professional, clean. Chloe's stomach dropped. "You said you made a deal with him." "I did." "Then who killed him?" That is the question everyone is asking. Andreas crouched beside Nikos, who immediately abandoned his book to climb into his father's lap. "And unfortunately, I am the most obvious suspect." "But you didn't do it." "No, but I am one of perhaps 5 people with the resources and motivation to have him killed." He stroked Nikos's hair absently, his mind clearly working through scenarios. "The timing is deliberate. Someone wants it to look like I violated our agreement. Why would someone do that? To start a war." Andreas looked at her over their son's head. "If Papadakis' organization believes I killed him, they will retaliate. If my people believe they are being framed, they will strike preemptively. Either way, violence erupts, and someone benefits from the chaos." Chloe felt ice spreading through her veins. "So what do we do?" "We prove I did not do it, and we find who did." He stood, lifting Nikos with him. "But first, I need to move you both again. The compound is secure, but if this escalates, no." Chloe stood as well, facing him. "No more running. No more hiding Nikos in a fortress while you go handle things. If we're doing this, if we're really trying to be a family, then we do it together." "Chloe, this is not a game. If Papadakis' people think I killed him, then convince them you didn't." She lifted her chin. "You said you wanted honesty. You said we'd be partners in parenting. Well, I'm saying our son doesn't need to grow up thinking his father's solution to every problem is to hide him away like a dirty secret. He needs to see you handle this, needs to see you fix it without violence." Andreas stared at her like she'd suggested he walk naked through Times Square. "You want me to bring you into a meeting with people who may very well try to kill me. I want you to show them you have a family, that you have something to lose, that you're not just some ruthless criminal who'd break an agreement 3 days after making it." Chloe moved closer. "Use us, Andreas. Not as leverage, but as proof that you've changed, that you're trying to build something legitimate. That is possibly the worst tactical advice I have ever received. Or the best." She held his gaze. "Because right now they see you as a threat. Show them you're a father first. Show them you kept your word because you're building something worth protecting." Andreas was silent for a long moment, Nikos babbling happily in his arms, completely oblivious to the tension. Then something shifted in his expression, calculation giving way to something that looked almost like wonder. "You are either brilliant or insane," he said quietly. "Probably both." Chloe reached out, touching Nikos's hand. "But I'm right, and you know it. Your world operates on power and fear. Show them something different. Show them you have more to lose than they do. If this goes wrong, then we face it together, as a family." She forced strength into her voice she didn't entirely feel. "Isn't that what you wanted? For us to be a real family?" "Yes, but not at the risk of your safety. Everything about your life is a risk to our safety, Andreas. At least this way, we're choosing to face it instead of hiding from it." Chloe straightened her shoulders. "When's the meeting?" "Tonight, 8 o'clock. A warehouse in the industrial district." He shifted Nikos to his other arm. "It is neutral territory. Papadakis' second-in-command, a man named Demetrios, has agreed to hear me out before making any decisions about retaliation." "Then we'll go together." "Absolutely not. I will go. You will stay here with Nikolaos where it is safe. And prove to everyone that you're exactly what they think you are, A man who hides his vulnerabilities and operates alone. Chloe shook her head. No, we're going. Nico stays here with Maria and your security, but I'm coming with you. Chloe, are we partners or not? She crossed her arms. Because if we're partners, you don't get to make unilateral decisions about my involvement. You said you wanted honesty and cooperation. This is what that looks like. Andreas looked like he wanted to argue, looked like he wanted to lock her in the compound and handle this his way. But then Nikos patted his face, saying "Dada," with perfect trust, and something in Andreas's expression crumbled. You will stay behind me at all times, he said finally. You will not speak unless I indicate it is safe to do so. You will wear a vest, and if I tell you to run, you run. No arguments. Agreed. I mean it, Chloe. If this goes badly, you do not try to help me. You do not try to be brave. You get out and you get back to Nikolaos. Okay. She swallowed hard. Okay. Andreas handed Nikos to her, then pulled out his phone, already making calls. She listened to him switch between Greek and English, arranging security, coordinating logistics, preparing for every contingency. This was Andreas Constantine in his element, commanding, strategic, 3 steps ahead of everyone else. But when he looked at her and Nikos, something in his eyes softened, just for a moment. Just enough for her to see that beneath the calculated exterior was a man terrified of losing what he'd just found. The hours before the meeting passed in a blur of preparation. Maria fussed over Nikos, preparing his dinner early and setting up a mountain of activities to keep him occupied. Andreas's sister Elena called from Athens, her voice sharp with concern even through the phone speaker. You are being reckless, Andreas, she said in English, presumably for Chloe's benefit. Taking the mother of your child into a hostile meeting? Have you lost your mind? Possibly. Andreas was strapping on a shoulder holster, checking his weapon with practiced efficiency. But Chloe made a valid point. They need to see that I have changed, that I am not the same man who would have eliminated Papadakis without hesitation. And if they decide to eliminate you instead, then you become Nikolaos's guardian, as we discussed. The papers are already filed. Andreas glanced at Chloe. But I do not intend to die tonight. You never intend to die, brother, yet you consistently put yourself in situations where death becomes a distinct possibility. Elena's sigh was audible across the miles. At least tell me you have adequate security. 12 men, all armed, all loyal. Andreas finished with the holster, shrugging on a jacket to conceal it. Chloe will be protected. Chloe should be here with me in Athens, where it is actually safe. Chloe is standing right here and can hear you, Chloe interjected. And I'm going because someone needs to make sure your brother doesn't solve every problem with violence. Elena laughed, the sound surprised and genuine. Oh, I like her. Andreas, you have found someone with a spine. Do try not to get her killed. That is the plan. Andreas ended the call, then turned to Chloe with an expression that was equal parts exasperated and admiring. You do not have to do this, yes, I do. She smoothed down the sweater she'd chosen, soft blue cashmere that looked non-threatening but expensive. Andreas had told her appearance mattered, that she needed to look like someone worth protecting, worth keeping safe. For Nikos. For us. For whatever we're trying to build here. Andreas crossed to her, cupping her face in his hands. If anything happens to you because of me, because of this life, I will never forgive myself. Then don't let anything happen. She covered his hands with hers. We do this together. We come home together, and we show our son that his parents are a team. Deal? Deal. He pressed his lips to her forehead, the gesture tender and devastating. But you wear the vest, non-negotiable. The bulletproof vest was lighter than she'd expected, fitting snugly under her coat. Andreas adjusted it with clinical efficiency, his hands impersonal even as his eyes held a storm of emotions. When he was satisfied with the fit, he helped her into the coat, his fingers lingering on her shoulders. Stay close to me, he said quietly, and trust that I will protect you. I do trust you. And she did, she realized. Despite everything, despite the danger and the violence and the impossible situation, she trusted Andreas Constantine to keep her safe. Let's go. The warehouse was exactly as threatening as Chloe had imagined. Located in an industrial area that looked abandoned even during daylight, it loomed in the darkness like something from a nightmare. Andreas's convoy arrived precisely at 8, the SUVs forming a protective formation around the vehicle carrying her and Andreas. "Last chance to change your mind," Andreas said as they sat in the idling vehicle. "Not changing my mind." Chloe's heart was hammering, but she kept her voice steady. "We do this together." Andreas gave a signal, and his men exited first, establishing a perimeter. Then he stepped out, moving around to open her door with the courtesy of a man escorting his date to dinner rather than leading her into potential gunfire. The warehouse interior was vast and cold, lit by harsh overhead lights that created more shadows than illumination. At the far end, a group of men stood waiting. Chloe counted 8 of them, all dressed in dark suits, all watching Andreas's approach with expressions that ranged from hostile to murderous. One man stepped forward, mid-50s, gray-haired, with the bearing of someone who'd climbed over bodies to reach his position. This had to be Dimitrios. "Constantine." His English was heavily accented. "You bring woman to business meeting. This is insult." "This is my family." Andreas kept Chloe slightly behind him but didn't hide her. "Chloe Hughes, the mother of my son." "Chloe, this is Dimitrios Stavros, who was Kostas Papadakis' second in command." Dimitrios' eyes flickered to her, assessing and cold. "You think pretty face makes us forget you killed Kostas?" "I did not kill Kostas." Andreas's voice was steel. "I made a deal with him 3 days ago. A deal that benefited both of us. I had no reason to break it." "You had every reason. You are Andreas Constantine. You do not share power. You do not make deals that last." Dimitrios stepped closer, his men moving with him. "Kostas was weak to trust you. We will not make same mistake." "Then you are making a different mistake." Andreas didn't retreat, didn't flinch, "because I did not kill him. But someone wanted you to think I did. Someone who benefits from a war between our organizations." "Who?" The question was skeptical, dismissive. "That is what we should be asking together." Andreas pulled out his phone, displaying something Chloe couldn't see. "This is security footage from my compound, time-stamped from the night Kostas was killed. I was there, with my son, with Chloe. I did not leave." Dimitrios took the phone, studying the screen with narrowed eyes. His men crowded around, watching. The silence stretched, tense and dangerous. "This could be fake," Dimitrios said finally. "It could be, but it is not." Andreas reclaimed his phone. "I also have the location data from my vehicles, communications logs showing I made no calls to any of my people that night, and testimony from 12 security personnel who will swear I never left the compound. Witnesses can be bought. So can assassinations." Andreas's patience was clearly wearing thin. "Think, Dimitrios. I had a deal with Kostas, a deal that gave me what I wanted without the cost of a war. Why would I throw that away 3 days later? What possible benefit would I gain from killing him? You gain everything: territory, power, elimination of rival. I already had those things through our agreement. What I gained was peace, time with my family, a chance to build something legitimate." Andreas gestured to Chloe. "I brought her here because I need you to understand I am not the same man I was 6 months ago. I have a son now, an heir. I am trying to build a future that does not involve constant violence." Dimitrios looked at Chloe again, his expression unreadable. "You choose strange time to grow conscience." "Not conscience, priority." Andreas's hand found Chloe's, linking their fingers. "My priority is my family, keeping them safe, giving my son a life that is better than the one I had. I cannot do that if I am constantly at war." Pretty words. But Dimitrios sounded less certain now. True words. Chloe spoke before she could stop herself. Andreas tensed beside her, but didn't silence her. "I was hiding from him for 18 months. Hiding our son because I was afraid of this world, of this life. But he found us anyway. And when he did, he could have taken Nikos from me, could have destroyed my life. Instead, he asked me to trust him, to give him a chance to be a father, to be a partner." She stepped forward, bringing herself even with Andreas, despite the vest and the guns and the very real danger. "That's not the behavior of a man who would break his word 3 days after giving it. That's a man who's trying to change." Dimitrios studied her with new interest. You love him? The question hit like a physical blow. Chloe's mouth opened, then closed. Did she love Andreas? She'd fled from him, had spent 18 months convincing herself he was a monster, but she'd also called him when Nikos was dying, had trusted him with their son, had willingly walked into this warehouse because she believed in what they were building. I'm learning to, she said honestly, and he's learning to be someone worthy of it. Don't punish him for trying to be better. Demetrios looked between them, then at Andreas's men, then back to Andreas himself. The calculation in his eyes was visible, weighing truth against lies, risk against benefit. If you did not kill Kostas, he said slowly, then who did? Someone who wants us fighting each other instead of watching for other threats. Andreas pulled out his phone again, swiping through information. I have been investigating. 3 shipping contracts that should have gone to either my organization or yours were awarded to a newcomer last month. A company called Aegean Consolidated, small, under the radar, but growing fast. I know nothing of this company. Neither did I, until I looked deeper. Andreas handed over his phone. The company is registered in Cyprus, owned by a holding company in the Caymans, which is owned by another company in Luxembourg. But if you trace it back far enough, you find a name, Alexios Manos. The reaction was immediate. Demetrios' face went dark with rage, and his men shifted, hands moving toward weapons. Manos, Demetrios spat the name like a curse. That snake. Kostas banished him 5 years ago for stealing, and he has been building power ever since, waiting for an opportunity. Andreas reclaimed his phone. What better opportunity than to eliminate Kostas and have me blamed for it? He triggers a war, we destroy each other, and he moves in to claim the territory we leave behind. Demetrios was silent for a long moment. Then he turned to his men, speaking rapid Greek. An argument broke out, voices raised, hands gesturing. Chloe pressed closer to Andreas, suddenly very aware of how many guns were in this room. Andreas's hand tightened on hers. It is all right, he murmured. They are debating, not threatening. How can you tell? Because if they were going to shoot us, they would have done it already. He said it so calmly that Chloe couldn't tell if he was serious or trying to keep her from panicking. Finally, Demetrios held up a hand, silencing his men. He turned back to Andreas, his expression still hard but less murderous. We do not trust you, Constantine, but we do not trust Manos either. He crossed his arms. We will investigate your information. If it is true, if Manos killed Kostas to start war between us, then we will deal with him. Together. Together. Andreas extended his hand. United front. No war between our organizations. Just focused elimination of a common enemy. Demetrios stared at the offered hand for a long moment. Then slowly, he reached out and grasped it. But if we find you are lying, if this is trick, then you kill me. Andreas said it simply. You have my word, Demetrios. I did not kill Kostas. I will help you prove who did, and when we find Manos, we will make sure he never threatens either of us again. Deal. Demetrios released his hand. But she stays away from this. The woman and your son. They do not involve in business. Agreed. Andreas pulled Chloe back toward his side. They are family. They remain protected and separate. Demetrios nodded once, then turned and walked away, his men following. Within moments, the warehouse was emptying, the threat dissolving as quickly as it had formed. Andreas waited until they were alone except for his own security before he moved. Then he pulled Chloe against him, his arms coming around her with desperate strength. That was the most terrifying and impressive thing I have ever witnessed, he said into her hair. Do not ever do it again. You're the one who brought me here. No, you insisted on coming, and then you spoke when I specifically told you not to, unless it was safe. It was safe enough. Chloe pulled back to look at him. Did it work? Did we convince them? You convinced them. Andreas cupped her face. That part about learning to love me. Was it true? Or were you playing to the audience? Chloe's heart raced. This was the moment. The choice. She could deflect, could claim it was just strategy, could maintain the walls she'd built. Or she could be honest, could admit the truth that had been growing since the moment she'd called him for help. It was true, she whispered. I'm terrified of it. But it's true. Andreas's expression transformed. the harsh lines softening into something that looked almost like joy. I have loved you since the night we met in Athens. Since you looked at me like I was just a man, not a monster or a meal ticket or a threat, just a man who interested you. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. I will spend the rest of my life proving I am worthy of the chance you are giving me. You don't have to be worthy, Andreas. You just have to be honest and present and willing to try. I can do that. He leaned his forehead against hers. For you, for Nikolaos, for us. They stood there in the empty warehouse, holding each other, building something fragile and real out of fear and trust and desperate hope. Outside, Andreas's men waited. At the compound, Nikos was sleeping peacefully, unaware of the danger his parents had just faced. And somewhere in the shadows, Alexios Manos was making plans that would force them all to face one final test. But for now, in this moment, Chloe let herself believe that maybe they could actually make this work. That maybe love could exist alongside danger. That maybe Andreas Constantine could be both a father and a criminal, both tender and ruthless, both the man who'd terrified her and the man she was learning to trust. Take me home, she said quietly. I want to see our son. Home, Andreas echoed like he was testing the word, like it was something new and precious. Yes, let us go home. The drive back to the compound was quiet, both of them lost in thought, but Andreas never let go of her hand, his thumb tracing absent patterns on her skin. And when they finally arrived, when they climbed the stairs together to check on Nikos, they stood side by side looking down at their sleeping child with matching expressions of wonder and fierce protectiveness. We're going to make this work, Andreas said softly. Whatever it takes, however long it takes. We will build a family. We already are, Chloe replied. We just have to stop fighting it. And for the first time since she'd fled Athens, she believed it might actually be true. 3 months later, Chloe woke to find Andreas's side of the bed empty again. It had become a pattern she both resented and understood. He would hold her through the night, their bodies fitting together with an ease that felt inevitable, and then disappear before dawn to handle the endless demands of his empire. She'd stopped asking him to stay. He'd stopped apologizing for leaving. They'd fallen into a rhythm, she and Andreas and Nikos. A strange, fragile routine that looked almost like family from the outside. Breakfast together when Andreas was in town. Evenings where he'd read to Nikos in Greek while she cleaned up from dinner. Nights where the barriers between them dissolved in the darkness, only to rebuild themselves come morning. But something had shifted in the past week. Andreas had been distracted, tense in a way that had nothing to do with external threats. She'd caught him watching her with an expression she couldn't decipher, like he was working through a problem that had no clear solution. Chloe found him in the kitchen, making coffee with the single-minded focus he brought to everything. Nikos was still asleep upstairs, giving them a rare moment alone. You left early, she said, sliding onto a bar stool. I had calls with Athens, time difference. He poured her a cup without asking, exactly the way she liked it. 3 months, and he had memorized every small preference. Did I wake you? No, just noticed you were gone. She wrapped her hands around the warm ceramic. Everything okay? Andreas turned to face her, leaning against the counter. He was dressed for the day already, charcoal slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. Professional, controlled. But there was something in his eyes that made her pulse quicken. I need to tell you something, he said. Dread pooled in her stomach. That sounds ominous. Not ominous, just overdue. He moved closer, stopping just short of touching her. I have been making changes. To my operations. As you asked. What kind of changes? The kind that will take me out of the gray areas and into legitimate business. He held her gaze. I have been selling off the less legal enterprises. Shipping routes that carry things I would prefer my son never know about. Partnerships with men who solve problems with violence first. All of it. Chloe set down her coffee cup carefully. That's what you've been doing? These past months? Yes. It is not simple. There are obligations, agreements that cannot be broken without consequences. But I have been navigating them, carefully, slowly, so that when Nikolaos is old enough to ask what his father does, I can tell him the truth without shame. Andreas, her voice caught, that's your entire empire. No, That is the rotting foundation of my empire. I am rebuilding it into something better, something sustainable. He reached out, tucking hair behind her ear in that gesture that had become achingly familiar. Something worthy of you both. Why didn't you tell me? Because I needed to be certain I could actually accomplish it before I made promises I could not keep. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. I do not make empty gestures, Chloe. When I commit to something, I see it through, and I'm committed to this. To being the man you need me to be. She wanted to believe him, wanted it so badly it hurt. But fear had its claws in deep. And if your enemies see this as weakness, if they come after us again, then I will handle them, but not with the methods I used before. Andreas's expression hardened. I am not abandoning my strength, Chloe. I am redirecting it. There is power in legitimacy, influence that comes from being untouchable by law rather than operating outside it. That is what I am building now. How long will it take? I am nearly finished. Another month, perhaps 2, and the transition will be complete. He paused. And then, I want to marry you. The words hit her like a physical blow. What? Marry me. Make this official. Give Nikolaos a family that exists on paper as well as in practice. He said it calmly, like he was discussing business terms instead of proposing marriage. I have waited 3 months to ask. I wanted to prove I could change first. Andreas, I can't. We're not. This isn't. She struggled to find words. You can't just announce you want to get married like you're scheduling a meeting. Why not? I know what I want. I want you. I want our son. I want to build a life that does not require running or hiding or making impossible choices. He moved closer, bracketing her with his arms against the counter. Tell me you do not want the same thing. Of course I want it, but wanting something and it being possible are 2 different things. What is impossible about it? His voice dropped to something intimate, dangerous. We already live together. We already share a bed. We already raise our son as partners. The only thing missing is the legal recognition and the promise that we will continue doing so. The promise terrifies me. The confession came out raw. Because what if you can't actually change? What if 6 months from now you're back to making deals with criminals and I'm trapped in a marriage I can't escape? Then leave. Andreas said it simply. I told you 3 months ago, I will not force you to stay. If I fail, if I become the man you fear, then you walk away, and I will not stop you. You also said you'd fight me for custody. That was before. His hand settled on her hips, grounding. Before I understood what you were trying to protect him from. Before I realized that being a father means putting his needs above my pride. If you truly believe he would be better off away from me, I will not fight you. He paused, his gaze intense. But I am betting everything that you will not want to leave, that what we are building together is stronger than your fear. Chloe's breath caught. This was Andreas at his most dangerous, not threatening, not controlling, but utterly sincere, laying himself bare in a way she'd never seen from him. I need time, she whispered. Take it. He pressed his forehead to hers. But know that I am not going anywhere. Know that every day I wake up and choose you, choose him, choose this life we are building, and I will continue choosing it until you believe me. The sound of small feet padding down the hallway broke the moment. They separated just as Nikos appeared in the doorway, his dark hair sticking up in all directions, clutching his stuffed elephant. Mama, Dada, hungry. Andreas smiled, the transformation instantaneous. Come here, little one. Let us see what we can make for breakfast. The rest of the morning unfolded with comfortable domesticity. Andreas made scrambled eggs while Chloe cut fruit. Nikos sat at the table, chattering in his mix of English and Greek words, completely oblivious to the tension still humming between his parents. But Chloe couldn't stop thinking about Andreas's proposal, about the changes he claimed to be making, about the life he was offering. She wanted to believe it was possible, wanted to trust that he could actually transform himself from the ruthless kingpin she'd fled to the partner she needed. But trust was a fragile thing, and Andreas had spent their entire relationship being exactly what she'd feared. Until now. Until these past 3 months where he'd been patient, present, and genuinely trying to be different. The week passed in careful normalcy. Andreas continued his mysterious calls and meetings. Chloe enrolled Nikos in a music class at a nearby community center, one of the first times she'd ventured beyond the estate's walls. Andreas had insisted on security, but he'd kept it discreet, just two men who looked like ordinary parents waiting for their own children. She was starting to see how this could work, how they could build something real within the framework of his world. It wasn't the life she'd imagined, but it was more than she'd thought possible. Then everything exploded. Chloe was giving Nikos a bath when Maria appeared in the doorway, her usually composed expression cracked with urgency. "Ms. Hughes, you need to come downstairs, now." "What's wrong?" "Just come, please." Maria's tone left no room for argument. Chloe lifted Nikos from the tub, wrapped him in a towel, and carried him downstairs. The foyer was full of men, Andreas's security team, all armed, all speaking rapid Greek, and in the center of it all stood Andreas, holding a phone to his ear, his expression absolutely murderous. He saw her and disconnected the call immediately. "Take Nikolaos upstairs." "What's happening?" "Papadakis broke our agreement. He has taken someone I care about as leverage." Andreas's voice was arctic. "My sister, Elena." The blood drained from Chloe's face. "Oh my God!" "He is demanding I surrender my Chicago operations completely, all of them, and he wants me to come to New York personally to negotiate." Andreas's hands clenched into fists. "It is a trap. He knows if he can eliminate me, everything I have built falls apart." "Then don't go." Chloe shifted Nikos higher on her hip, the boy picking up on the tension and whimpering. "Call the police, the FBI, someone." "And tell them what? That my criminal associate has kidnapped my sister as part of a business dispute?" Andreas laughed bitterly. "They would arrest us all. Elena would die before they could mount a proper response." "So what are you going to do?" He looked at her, and she saw the calculation happening behind his eyes. Saw him weighing options, running scenarios, planning something that would probably get him killed. "I'm going to get my sister back." "Andreas, no. I do not have a choice, Chloe. She is family. She is innocent in all of this. I will not let her suffer for my decisions." He moved toward her, cupping her face with both hands. "I need you to stay here. Keep Nikolaos safe. If I do not return, stop." She cut him off, tears burning her eyes. "Don't you dare give me the 'if I don't return' speech. Not now. Not when I'm finally starting to believe this could work." "Then believe this. I will come back. I will end Papadakis. I will save Elena, and I will come back to you and our son." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. Quick, fierce kisses that tasted like desperation. "Trust me." "I do." The realization hit her like lightning. She did trust him, completely. "But I also know you're about to do something incredibly stupid and dangerous, and I'm terrified." "Then be terrified, but also have faith." He pulled back, already shifting into the cold, controlled version of himself that handled crises. "I leave in 1 hour. Maria knows what to do if things go wrong." "They're not going to go wrong." Chloe grabbed his arm. "Because I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not." "Yes, absolutely yes." She set Nikos down, the boy immediately running to Andreas and clutching his leg. "You need leverage of your own. You need something that makes Papadakis hesitate, and I'm that something." "Chloe, I will not risk you. You're not risking me. I'm choosing to come." She met his eyes steadily. "You said we're partners now. Equal partners. So let me be your partner in this too. Let me help you save your sister." Andreas stared at her like she'd lost her mind. "Do you understand what you are offering? If this goes wrong, if Papadakis decides to take you as well, then you'll get us both back. Because that's what you do, Andreas. You protect what's yours, and I'm yours, whether I've been ready to admit it or not." She moved closer, leaving Nikos playing at their feet. "I love you. I probably never stopped loving you, even when I was running. And I'm not going to let you walk into danger alone when I can help." The words hung in the air between them. Andreas looked like she'd struck him. "You love me," he repeated slowly. "Yes, you arrogant, impossible, infuriating man. I love you." Tears spilled over now. "And I'm going to marry you, and we're going to raise our son together, and we're going to figure out how to make this insane life work." But first, we're going to save Elena. Together. Andreas pulled her against him, kissing her with a desperation that stole her breath. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were suspiciously bright. You are the most terrifying woman I have ever met. Good. You need someone who terrifies you. She smiled through her tears. Now tell me the plan. He did. It was risky and complicated and required perfect timing. Papadakis expected Andreas to come alone, which meant bringing Chloe would be unexpected. The shock value alone might buy them crucial seconds. And if Chloe could get to Elena while Andreas handled Papadakis, they could extract her before things turned violent. Maria would stay with Nikos at the estate, protected by enough security to repel a small army. Chloe hated leaving her son, but she trusted Maria. And she trusted that Andreas wouldn't have suggested this plan if he thought there was any real chance they wouldn't come back. They left at sunset, driving through Chicago and then across state lines toward New York. Andreas spent the drive making calls in Greek, coordinating with people whose names she didn't recognize. She sat beside him, holding his free hand, lending silent support. When this is over, Andreas said quietly as they crossed into New York, we are done with this life. Completely. I will finish the transition to legitimate business, and we will move somewhere quieter. Somewhere Nikolaos can grow up without armed guards and security protocols. Where? Wherever you want. Greece, California, anywhere, as long as we are together. Chloe squeezed his hand. I want to give him siblings. I want a house with a yard and neighbors who wave hello. I want normal. Then we will have normal. I will buy you the most aggressively normal house in the most boring suburb I can find. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. After tonight, after I end this. The meeting location was a warehouse in Brooklyn, industrial and isolated. Andreas parked 2 blocks away and they approached on foot. His men were already in position, invisible but present. Chloe could feel them watching, ready to intervene. Andreas stopped before they entered the building. Last chance to change your mind. Not a chance? Chloe checked the small earpiece he'd given her, the wire that would let his team track her location. Let's go get your sister. They walked in together. The warehouse was exactly what she'd expected. Concrete floors, high ceilings, shadows everywhere. Papadakis waited in the center, flanked by a dozen men. And tied to a chair, looking defiant despite obvious fear, was a woman who could only be Elena. She had Andreas's dark eyes, his sharp features, his absolute refusal to look defeated. Andreas Constantine. Papadakis smiled like a shark. You actually came, and you brought the nurse. How touching. Release my sister. Andreas's voice could have cut glass. And we can discuss terms. Oh, I think we're past discussion. Papadakis gestured, and one of his men pressed a gun to Elena's head. You're going to sign over every operation you have in Chicago. Every warehouse, every route, every contact, and then you're going to walk away and never come back. That's the deal. And if I refuse? Then I kill your sister, then I kill your pretty nurse, and then I come for your son. Papadakis said it casually. I've been very patient, Andreas, but my patience is exhausted. Andreas didn't move, didn't react, just stood there like a statue carved from ice. Then Chloe stepped forward. Wait. She held up her hands. I'm a nurse. Let me check her, make sure she's not injured, then we'll discuss whatever you want. Papadakis studied her. You think I'm stupid? You think I don't know Andreas has people here? I know you're smart enough to recognize that a dead hostage has no value. Chloe kept her voice steady. Let me check her. 30 seconds, then you can get back to your threats. Something in her tone must have worked. Papadakis nodded, and Chloe moved toward Elena. She knelt beside the chair, checking pulse, pupils, making a show of professional assessment. And as she did, she whispered in Greek words Andreas had taught her during the drive. Be ready. When I move, you move. Elena's eyes widened fractionally, then she nodded almost imperceptibly. Chloe stood, turning back to Papadakis. She's dehydrated, but otherwise okay. You can... Andreas moved. It happened so fast that Chloe barely tracked it. 1 second, he was standing still. The next, he had disarmed the man closest to him and put a bullet through the shoulder of the man holding the gun to Elena's head. The man screamed and dropped, and chaos erupted. Chloe dove for Elena, cutting the ropes binding her with a knife she'd hidden in her jacket. Andreas's team flooded in from the shadows, 8 men in tactical gear, moving with military precision. Gunfire echoed through the warehouse. Go! Elena grabbed Chloe's arm, pulling her toward an exit Andreas had marked earlier. They ran, Elena limping but moving fast, heading for the side door where one of Andreas's men waited with a vehicle. Behind them, Chloe heard Papadakis shouting, heard Andreas's cold voice responding with words she couldn't make out. Then more gunfire, and her heart stopped. They burst out of the warehouse into cold night air. The SUV was there, engine running. Elena practically threw Chloe into the back seat before climbing in herself. Drive, Elena commanded, in accented English. Now! The vehicle peeled out just as Andreas emerged from the warehouse, sprinting toward them with 3 of his men. He dove into the front seat as the driver hit the gas, and they were moving, racing away from the warehouse as police sirens wailed in the distance. Is he dead? Chloe asked, not sure she wanted the answer. No. Andreas was checking his gun, his movements automatic. But he is severely injured and in federal custody now. I had arranged for the FBI to raid the warehouse 5 minutes after our arrival. They have him on kidnapping, weapons charges, and a dozen other violations. He glanced back at his sister. Elena, are you hurt? Nothing serious. Elena's voice was shaky but strong. You took your time, brother. I was being thorough. He twisted in his seat to look at Chloe. You were magnificent. I was terrified. She grabbed his hand, needing the contact. Don't ever make me do that again. Never. I swear it. He brought her knuckles to his lips. We are done with this world, Chloe. Completely done. After tonight, I walk away from all of it. Can you actually do that? Elena asked. Just walk away? I already have. This was the last thread. Andreas's smile was grim. Papadakis is in custody. The FBI will offer him a deal, testify against the other organizations, and he gets protective custody instead of life in prison. He will take it, and in doing so, he will destroy what remains of the network I used to be part of. You planned this. Chloe stared at him. The whole thing. You knew he would come after Elena. I suspected he might, so I prepared. I had the FBI ready. I had contingencies in place. He met her eyes. I told you I would end this. I meant it. The drive back to Chicago took hours. Elena slept in the back seat, exhausted from her ordeal. Chloe stayed awake, watching the landscape blur past, holding Andreas's hand like a lifeline. I meant what I said, she told him, as dawn started to break. About loving you, about marrying you. I know. He brought her hand to his lips again. And I will spend the rest of my life proving I am worthy of it. You already have. They arrived at the estate as the sun was rising, bathing everything in gold light. Maria met them at the door with Nikos, who'd just woken up. The boy took one look at his parents and started babbling excitedly, reaching for both of them. Andreas took his son, holding him close, and Chloe wrapped her arms around them both. Elena watched from the doorway, smiling through her exhaustion. Welcome to the family, Elena said to Chloe. Though I warn you, we are all slightly insane. I think I can handle it. Chloe looked up at Andreas, saw the love and relief and determination in his eyes. We can handle anything together. Over the next weeks, Andreas made good on every promise. He finalized the sale of his remaining questionable operations. He set up legitimate shipping companies, investment portfolios, real estate holdings, all legal, all clean. He hired lawyers and accountants and created a structure that would provide for his family for generations without requiring anything illegal. And then, on a Tuesday evening 3 months after the warehouse, he took Chloe out to the garden at sunset. Nikos was with Elena and Maria, giving them privacy. The late spring air was warm and sweet with flowers. Andreas knelt in the grass, pulling out a ring that was simple and perfect, a single diamond on a platinum band, elegant without being ostentatious. Chloe Hughes, you are the bravest, most stubborn, most infuriating woman I have ever known. You ran from me, hid from me, and then came back to me despite every reason not to. You gave me a son I did not deserve and a chance I absolutely did not earn. And I am asking you now, with everything I am, to marry me, to build a life together, to trust that I can be the man you need me to be. Tears streamed down Chloe's face. You already are that man, Andreas. You've been that man for months now, so yes, I'll marry you. He slid the ring onto her finger and pulled her down into a kiss that felt like coming home. When they finally broke apart, both laughing and crying, Nikos came running from the house, Elena and Maria trailing behind. Dada! Mama! He crashed into them, and they gathered him up, the three of them tangled together in the grass. We are getting married, little one, Andreas told his son in Greek and then English. Your mama and I are making this official. Yay! Nikos clapped his hands, not understanding but feeding off their joy. Family! Yes. Chloe kissed her son's dark hair, then looked up at the man who'd been her terror and her salvation. Family. They were married 6 weeks later in a small ceremony at the estate. Elena stood as Chloe's maid of honor, crying through the entire service. Nikos was the ring bearer, taking his job very seriously and only dropping the rings twice. Maria orchestrated everything with military precision. As they stood under the flower-covered arbor, exchanging vows, Chloe looked at Andreas and saw not the dangerous man she'd fled from, but the partner she'd chosen, the father of her child, the man who'd torn apart his empire to build something better. I love you, she whispered as he slid the wedding band onto her finger. I love you, he answered. Always. They kissed as husband and wife, and Nikos cheered and Elena threw flowers, and Chloe felt something in her chest finally settle. Finally, relax. This was right. This was home. Later that night, after the small reception had ended and Nikos was asleep upstairs, Andreas led Chloe out to the terrace. The stars were brilliant overhead, and music drifted from the house behind them. Dance with me, he said, pulling her into his arms. They swayed together, no particular rhythm, just moving with each other. Chloe rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat, steady and strong. I have something to tell you, Andreas murmured against her hair. If it's bad news, it can wait until tomorrow. Today's been perfect. It is not bad news. He pulled back to look at her. I bought a house. In California. By the ocean. There's a yard for Nikolaos. Good schools nearby. Normal neighbors who do not know or care what I used to do for a living. Chloe's breath caught. You actually did it. I promised you normal. I intend to deliver. He smiled. We can move whenever you're ready, or we can split time between there and here. Whatever you want. What do you want? I want you to be happy. I want our son to grow up safe. I want to give you the life you deserve. He cupped her face. I want to be the man you see when you look at me, not the ghost of who I used to be. You are that man, Andreas. You've proven it over and over. Chloe kissed him softly. And yes, I want to see this house. I want to think about our future there. Good, because I may have also enrolled Nikolaos in a music program there, and looked into graduate nursing programs for you nearby, and planned approximately 17 years' worth of our lives together. She laughed, the sound free and genuine. Of course you did. I am a planner. You knew this about me. I did, and I love that about you. She pulled him closer. I love everything about you, even the controlling, overbearing parts. Especially those parts, he corrected with a smile. They are my best features. Your best feature is your capacity to change, to become better, to choose love over fear. Andreas grew serious. You taught me that. You and Nikolaos. You showed me that there is more to life than power and control, that true strength is vulnerability, that the greatest victory is not defeating your enemies, but building something worth protecting. We built that together, Chloe said softly, and we'll keep building it, every day, for the rest of our lives. For the rest of our lives, he echoed. They stood there under the stars, holding each other, two people who'd been broken apart and somehow found their way back together. Two people who'd learned that love wasn't about possession or control, but about partnership and trust and choosing each other every single day. Inside, Nico stirred in his sleep, dreaming of whatever toddlers dreamed about. Safe, protected, loved by parents who would move mountains to give him the life he deserved. This was their family now, forged in fire, tested by danger, and ultimately strengthened by the choice to trust, to believe, to love without reservation. And as Andrea swept Chloe into a proper dance, twirling her under the stars while she laughed with pure joy, both of them knew this was just the beginning, the first page of a story they would write together, a story of transformation and redemption and love that conquered fear, a story with a happy ending they'd earned with every hard choice, every act of faith, every moment they chose each other over everything else. Their forever had finally begun,